So they have highlighted the importance of the necessity for this type of facility or space. But it is difficult for commoners to understand the intention behind creating this type of facility. Why this place? Why in Seoul? And the answer was just because we need this place. So for people who are the residents of these areas, they expected to have some positive impact after these facilities were relocated to, suburban areas or rural areas. So in a way, this came with innate sort of conflicts, causes for conflict. Please take a look at this, the bird's eye view photo. This was the Seoul City's development plan. So they were going to set up this hotel and convention zone. They were going to set up hotels and relevant facilities. And this road right here is connected to the hike path. And they just expected to have a lot of visitors coming in. And because they didn't have a lot of commercial facilities available, they decided to set up these facilities to sort of make them conveniently available to the residents. So in comparison to other spaces in Seoul, these areas were sort of less developed. That was a perception they had. So when you see the land, and if it's perceived as less developed, then you would naturally sort of think of ways to develop this area. So there was a perception of the public officials. And also one of the conflicts surrounding over the Seoul Innovation Park was that they used a top-down use of space. There were some spaces taken over by the public officials, and they were sort of utilized as facilities for administrators. So they were used for administration purposes. So they were office space for the government public servants. So last but not least, the utilization itself. So this place was leased. So there was an internal conflict between those who manage and operate these places, and also people who used the space. So these users were simply sort of renting out this space. So you can imagine the type of services you expect from people who rent the place and rent out the place. In conclusion, so let's say there's one single space or facility, and there are sort of duplicating and conflicting intentions and purposes. So where does innovation go? Where does innovation lie? If you take a look at this diagram, so the SIP was utilized in some parts by the Seoul Metropolitan Government and some of this place. In fact, quite a bit of this facility was used by the administration organizations. What is unfortunate is that the Seoul Metropolitan Government conducted its own audit, and they found out that there were some 37 areas which showed inadequacy of this place. This is quite surprising because this audit was conducted by Seoul Metropolitan Government itself. which was which had a quite favorable view towards SIPs. And this audit that I'm talking about, it took place in 2018. And what I'm trying to say here is that there were some, unreasonable things happening in terms of utilizing the space and facility. Although you had a favorable perception towards this sort of practice and this facility, there were some issues. As I explained before, the reason why they wanted to build up this place, they were saying, we can prove the need for this facility late down the road, later on. But it turns out, as they were operating this place, a lot of problems were sort of witnessed. So there were a lot of this place had benefits, unfair benefits, but unfair advantages from the get-go. So this has been turning into a space for official capacity. Ever since the audit, which was conducted in 2018, people had to utilize and lease this place based upon really stringent and strict regulations. And the Seoul Metropolitan Government, which is in charge of operating this place, they had to come up with the KPI to show the effectiveness of this place's operation. But they took a look at the quantitative measures only. So one of the indicators they utilized to assess their performance was to take a look at how many times this place was rented. But as you all know, when we need innovation as a society, we have to move away from the normative and conventional indicators of assessment or evaluation. But Seoul Metropolitan Government, pardon me, they were so caught up on utilizing the conventional indicators to assess their performance, to prove the effectiveness and also the need for this innovation park. And also, so within the if you take a look at the internal indicators, they didn't really have a proper standard or criteria for evaluation and assessment. So that's one of the most important factors that we have to consider when it comes to Seoul Innovation Park. So what do we have to think about now then? So why is this type of phenomenon is taking place? This is something that we should talk about, and this is something that I would like to pick your brain on. So I would like to talk about a few things. Number one, in terms of the administration. So they are looking for citizens, innocent citizens. What I mean by that is that those citizens who have absolutely no interest or relations with the stakeholders of Seoul Innovation Park. So these individuals have no relations to a certain political party, civil organization, or Seoul Innovation Park. So they were looking for these so-called innocent citizens, bipartisan citizens. So from the administration point of view, it is difficult, it's nearly impossible to find these individuals with no agenda. And this facility was pursuing innovation. but it didn't have a certain, subjects to benefit in mind. So there are a lot of groups and organizations using this Seoul Innovation Park. They were thinking about, grandiose agenda, for example, energy transition. But Seoul Innovation Park, it was confronted with issues that are more practical and realistic than those grandiose ideas. They were more concerned about the energy consumption and saving of local markets. Last but not least, so if you take a look at the upper hand side of this graph, we have innovation actors. When they're in these, civil organizations, they organize and they act, which means they were working underneath of the banner saying we have to act, we must act. But those individuals, once they become part of this public entity, all those problems that we have talked about, so they no longer are interested in the sort of desires and needs and requests made by the general public. So these individuals, these actors get to make decisions as soon as they are placed in the position to make decisions. Then they sort of flip their position. And within this sort of this institutional system, it becomes difficult for them to work with the public. Rather, they work against the public. This really is sort of ironic, isn't it? So I suppose we need to employ this sort of commons approach. We have to ask ourselves about our position. So who is going to be in charge of distributing resources? Who is going to sort of lay out the foundation for the intention and also the reason, the rationale behind these decisions? So, and also proposals. So what are the proposals? So against this backdrop, we have to think about the physical location of and physical facility itself as the Seoul Innovation Park. But also we have to employ multifaceted perceptions towards this facility. So what I would like to make here are 6 suggestions. So we should not give up on squatting. Occupation of urban spaces. So if you think about commons, though, all these facilities are composed and occupied based upon the need and desires of the public. And we should take the squatting as one of the general approaches and strategies. And continuously, we should share this. And in terms of the policies, though, we have a lot of dilemmas. The Korean policies are too individual. So those who tried out these policies, they were built based upon those individuals' experience, and they are not properly recorded or documented. Last but not least, we also have to find a way to sort of independently organize and manage all this. Of course, we do need regulations. Of course, we do need standards, but we should make them together. So, in my opinion, though, Seoul Innovation Park So it is a failure, but I'm not saying it is what it is because we already have failed. So we have to think about possibilities and potentials we can think of based upon this lesson learned. And I would like to talk about all these topics that I've mentioned with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you very much for keeping good time. So it's 2:25 right now. And I'd like to allocate 10 minutes each to each of the panelists here with us for the discussion, first and foremost. So rather than me summarizing the presentation, I think the panelists should go first. Okay, I don't think the mic is working. It is. Okay. My name is Jeonggi Hwang, and the presenter talked about the Gyeongui Line and the Seoul Innovation Park. It's something that I've been looking at for a long time, and I've even assessed it once. At the very end, the presenter talked about how we need to create principles and rules together, and I want to talk about that. We should have had that mindset from the very beginning. If we did, I don't think that we would see the problems that we do now. And it is about publicness, but more than that, there's civic groups that are against this development after the plan was initiated. And the government that's trying to pursue this is talking about publicness, and everybody basically, every party is talking about publicness, but I think they're focusing on different publicness. So, what is publicness then? I think that we should have reached an agreement of that public value from the beginning. And we see these stakeholders all going in different directions, which is unfortunate. Yesterday, as I looked at this topic, I searched through some previous articles. So last year, there was an article that mentioned how the planner of the future space of Seoul stated that this for the last 10 years has not been utilized that much as a hub. So basically, that person was looking at this land as a real estate in a real estate perspective. So how much economic value does this land have and all of that. And also the previous mayor, Mayor Park Won-sun, in 2014, when he declared to create the Seoul Innovation Park, this Seoul Innovation Park was announced by the head of the Eunpyeong district. And the purpose behind Seoul Innovation Park at that time was to create a collaborative research center of 40 universities and uh, to create many new jobs that are stable. This initial idea is very different from the Seoul Innovation Park that we see right now. And Mayor Oh Se-hoon right now is talking about economic culture town. Previously, the Mayor Park Won-sun was talking about creative culture park, which is pretty similar actually. The details may differ for each plan, but the big idea is the same. These days in Eunpyeong-gu, a lot of people who don't want the Seoul Innovation Park are saying that the residents didn't agree to this idea. But at that time, the head of the Eunpyeong district said that this would create a lot of new jobs and that it did get the agreement of the residents. All in all, the starting point and the end point became very different. And the residents of the area didn't feel like they could raise their voice. And in recent articles, I saw some interviews with residents of the developing space nearby. And one resident stated that it's good that this plan is ongoing near where they live. And some are saying that there's going to be more traffic if that land is developed. So basically, it's shedding light on how there's going to be more cars. They're not focusing on how this is public land. They're just saying that if we see overpopulation in this area because of the development, then it's just going to make our lives harder. And the same goes for the central government, but the projects that we see undertaken by Seoul metropolitan government aren't open to the opinions of residents right now. Basically, the government takes action and the residents just have to follow through with the plan right now. So that's what residents think. Oh, okay, that's what's going to happen with that land. That land is public land, it owes to the government, so we don't have a say in what they do. It'd be good if we just don't get hurt by the development. That's what residents basically think. And people who are for and against the Seoul Innovation Park recently were in an interview, and they stated that for the last 8 years, when looking at the operation of Innovation Park of Seoul, there would need to be residents' participation in evaluating the space. So residents want to know what kind of innovation activities occur in Seoul Innovation Park. And if residents had gotten the answer and if residents were able to participate, then I don't think that we would be in a situation right now. Of course, we should try to solve it now, although it's a bit late, but we should have taken some action much before. When we look at this in the context of Korea, the land that belongs to the local government is public land, basically. And the law that regulates that land, of course, exists. And it states there that the land should be used for the greater good of the public and citizens. So when we read that, it seems like residents can actively participate in the development process and that they can voice their opinions. But in reality, that's not the case. And residents don't really have any way to protest or voice their concerns. Right now in Korea, public land is around 30%. And much before, when this country was first founded, it was about 60%. For the last decades, such public land became privately owned, a lot of it, and 23% of the remaining public land, 30%, 23% out of 30% is the central government's land, and 7% is local government's land. So basically, right now, the bigger share of the pie is owned by the central government. So when we say commons, we can say that there's not much land or real estate that civic groups own. During the authoritative times in Korean history, most of the land owned by civic groups was given over to the regime, especially during the 70s and 30s. So because all of that land was given to the central government, that's the situation that we're in right now. So right now, Seoul Innovation Park is being built in a land that belongs to the Seoul metropolitan government. But in basically, this land should be seen in the perspective of commons. It should be used for residents. That's what this land, that's the purpose this land should serve. I don't think that commercial development is necessarily important here. Enough discussion should be done with residents, and we should really find the ideal purpose for this land. I think a good example is libraries. Think of nearby libraries nearby where you live. It's usually near mountains. It's not because the air is so clear and good there. It's because there's not enough land. So basically, areas like Seoul Innovation Park are nearby, have great public transportation networks, and this has a lot of economic value, and it is being developed right now. So Seoul Innovation Park from a long time ago, so Seoul Innovation Park was built on land that existed for a long time. It would have been good if residents could have actually used that land for their purpose for several years before we decided to create the Seoul Innovation Park. But as you know, immense budget was put into this project. And so basically the plan was proceeded in the wrong manner. So initial discussion should have been very important.
Thank you for your comment. Yeah, so if you are going to give it up for him, really give it up for him. Yeah, so I'm going to summarize what he said. Number one,
He said that unfortunately, the government failed to imbue the meaning of innovation to citizens. And second, commons in the administrative sense is something that people fail to go outside of. And also, it's important to see how we are using the common assets of citizens. So now let's go to the next panelist.
good afternoon. So I have my photo on, so it looks different than how I look in real life. There were a lot of people who were commenting on it, so I sincerely apologize. I didn't mean to use this old photo. It's not that old though. Anyhow, so this is in line with what is happening in Israel and Palestine. Yeah, so I do agree with what the presenter said. And the last portion, the our activity belonging to the nature. I think that's a really important statement, isn't it? So he criticized what the Seoul Metropolitan government has done, and also he talked about global citizenship. Uh, and I think it's in line with our topic, isn't it? So democracy, global citizenship, and transformative or transitional education. So I suppose the Seoul Innovation Park, we should not get caught up on this physical space. So we have to think about what type of democratic policies that the fifth cohort, sixth cohort, and seventh cohort of the Seoul metropolitan government. So this is in line with their codes and policies, political approach, especially in the 21st century, after 2000s. So the Korean society has sort of accumulated policies and experiments that we have conducted in the civic society. So all those contexts should be taken into consideration. And once again, I believe there have been, a range of activities, initiatives, and also movements as well, not only the Seoul metropolitan government, but also um, the central government as well. They have done a lot, but what is unfortunate is that all those policies, they are not conducted continuously. So, which is why we have to, revisit the limitations that we have. And I suppose Senator Kim has done a lot and contributed to this type of advancement. From the democratic point of view, so we have fallen short in terms of this. So the Seoul metropolitan government has attempted to achieve so much in terms of democracy, but it has fallen short. But it is worthwhile to note that they have tried to conduct these social experiments, but they fail to sort of, realize their vision by adopting real life and useful policies. If you think about the Seoul Innovation Park, so we have the Ministry of, Future, the Ministry of, Future Plan, and they were all innovative attempts and initiatives. And a lot of young people were sort of touched by what the Seoul metropolitan government has tried to do. But we criticize the fact that they started so big, but then they have fallen short on so many different fronts. So a lot of people came together because of what President Park did, and we took it to the street. We had the movement of, candlelight. We had a candlelight movement. And I suppose social innovation doesn't happen overnight. The second point I would like to make is that, we use the term global citizenship. I suppose this is a matter of sort of global perception, worldview. There are many agenda which have a direct sort of relationship with the global issues, global warming, aging, the youth problems, and gender problems. All these issues are sort of segmented and almost commercialized in Korea. So we should think about obviously the integration of macro strategies, but also we have to go beyond that. And we have to think about the global network we have utilized. And once again, we talked about this throughout the keynote speech as well. We haven't had the worldview which sees these problems as global issues. So without this type of worldview, without this type of direction, it is difficult to come up with proper indicators to make the assessment. So once again, this type of worldview is never discussed. So we only talk about the budget. Oh, we have had a budget cut. So how much money has been taken out of our pocket? But once we see the city with this type of worldview, we will be able to go even further. And also, I think the LGBTQ community issue, it is one of the quintessential issues that the Seoul government has been confronted with in the urban setting. Sexuality and gender issues. The Seoul metropolitan government failed to make official statements on those gender issues and LGBTQ or sexual minority issues. So we talk about ecological transition, ecological cultural issues will become even more important in our era. So once again, I would like to highlight the importance and significance of worldview. So it's going to be different than the past worldview. And now let's talk about transitional learning. So let's say some projects, initiatives, when we take them into the real world and realize them, in many cases in Korea, though, those initiatives are sort of conducted and led by the government. And as you now there are many education projects and initiatives going on across the nation. So when we talk about commons, so biopolitical was the term that was used by the presenter who did the presentation in the morning. So we continue to learn, we continue to use this curriculum, but we don't know how each individual can learn against this backdrop and how much they are learning. So I suppose we have to think about the commons and our attitude towards commons. And what we have missed out upon is the connection and also the time. So I'm not saying we should take it slow. Rather, we have to think about, and also we should have a consensus on the time because we have been, always sort of feel we have felt forced to hurry up. So we never talked about the time of commoning, which is different than Europe and Japan. So I think the core message of the key of politics should be about the key of commoning. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So right now, everybody's on time. So I'd like to allocate about 10 minutes to the floor. Does anybody from the floor want to speak on the topic? Okay, I see one person. Hello. Thank you very much for the presentation and great discussion from panelists. I feel like I've learned a great deal. I don't know that much about administrative affairs. I am studying administration actually. Within the administrative system, there's a lot of problems like Mr. Kim stated, and like all of the panelists stated, I really feel with what you've said. And I feel like going forward, what's important is to go outside this rigid box and to have flexible mindset within the administrative framework. You talked about time, and I feel like the speed and time of the administrative system right now is not on par with innovation. So I feel like we need some flexibility as well as time for citizens. And like mentioned before, there needs to be second, third, fourth chances, which means some money and time, and all in all, flexibility going forward. And also, the outlook of the world is what you talked about, and I think that that's important. Everybody, when coming together, all the stakeholders, the public officials especially, when getting together, always start with so what? So in the future, I feel like it's going to be a task to really persuade the public officials within the administrative system. So yes, I think there's some specific concerns that we could talk about. So could you maybe provide your insight on this matter? Okay, so next week, I am going to be giving a presentation on a presentation that Mr. Kim is supposed to give, and that is regarding the civic group centered around this SIP, and I was actually asked to give a presentation on this for the Eunpyeonggu residents. I feel like this is going to be a very tricky presentation, and your presentation gave me a lot of food for thought. SIP actually isn't regarding commons that is like water or mountain or really public land. It's actually been formed for a specific purpose for specific stakeholders. And right now, SMG is trying to change the purpose to another direction. And many residents focus on speculation and increasing their wealth, which is why they support the policies of Mayor Oh Se-hoon right now. And in this situation, our concern is first and foremost, what is our purpose? Do we want to protect SIP as it is? Or are we against the development plan of Mayor Oh? I think we need to first of all organize that thought. For several years, I've been working in this field, and I feel like SIP hasn't really created the result for residents' support or approval. So I think it's important to reflect on the situation first and foremost. It seems like people think if we have a good slogan, we'll get the resounding support of residents, but that doesn't work. There needs to be some good result to get actual support. And Mayor Oh's development plan has some faults, so I think we should shed light on those faults right now. But I don't think we're going to be able to do all of this. So I think we need to do two things. First is I think we need to squat, like was mentioned in the presentation. And squatting would be not regarding the landowners, the ones that have leased the land. It should be regarding people who throw questions against Mayor Oh's policy right now. So that's what we should squat for. We don't know when we will get answers though. So this is a problem of politics, right? This policy, especially urban development, is very hard to back down on once a project has been initiated. So I think some action should be taken by the residents regarding ordinances. And all in all, what we are left with in these cases is the questions we throw and providing a new starting point with our questions. So why has the previous project failed? What is the problem with the current project and the current policy? What kind of changes need to be made to solve the current problem? I think we should throw those questions so that even if the space leads to a bad case, we won't replicate those cases going forward. So regarding, I mean, you're experts in this area, so I wonder what you have to say about what I've mentioned. Okay, regarding the change to ordinances by residents, I think maybe later on. Okay, does anybody have any other opinions or questions? We have about 3 minutes remaining. Anybody from the floor with another question or another comment? Okay, let's wait for a short while. Okay, Mr. Kim Sang-chul, do you want to say something? Okay, so I'm actually more interested in another concern. I want to point two things out. In this era of climate crisis, what is the nation that we have created in the past? Does this nation have problem-solving abilities as a group? Because the nation looks very in enable. The nation doesn't seem to be very abled and effective. So there's some administrative experts that we believe are efficient, right, in a nation, whether we call them the government or else. When they monopolize public resources, we need to ask the question of whether we can create rules or regulations to use that public resource for another purpose. So this is something that comes from my own experience. When talking about common property to public officials usually refer to the public assets as mine or ours. So they would basically ask citizens, why do you want to do something with our assets? But in the aspect of democracy, that question doesn't work from the very beginning. But when we think of civic experience in Korea, it's about the process of seeing over and over again that the public good is not mine. So this SIP problem and in many other problems, we see a problem of ownership. What is mine and what is yours? The rights of citizens are limited in many cases, so we need some movement to oppose this. And regarding the SIP, I feel like we should focus on how, not how we should use it, but rather how to make nobody use it. So creating a regulatory grid maybe to make sure nobody can gain access of SIP. I think that's going to be one strategy in itself. I think we're afraid to do this because it's very precious land, but to go against the action of the government, I think maybe we should limit access to the land altogether. So that's my opinion. And when we do that, we can really think about bureaucracy and the characteristics of public goods. Okay, so I want to add on, whether it be common goods, commons, or SIP, there's no room for citizens to participate in the planning process. There's no way for them to dissent. As you have seen with the Gyeongui Line commons, the only method that citizens can utilize is squatting. So then the government files a lawsuit against those citizens, and that's why citizens have difficulty in dissenting against these plans. So right now, squatting is the most difficult, but the only way. And because I'm an architect, I do a lot of designing these spaces and such. And it all begins from the basic plan, right? And then that goes into creating the budget for the plan. The same went for the SIP. The public officials didn't even ask the citizens their opinions on this plan. And the high-ranking public officials, when they established this plan, said that, oh, yes, we haven't asked the opinions of the citizens, but we'll ask it later on when all of this budget is approved and we have finalized the plan in the later stages. So basically, the spaces are created first, and then opinions are asked. So the spaces are the spaces that public officials want rather than what residents want. And it doesn't apply just to SIP, it applies to many more spaces. And in a bigger picture, the government should actually have a metropolitan plan. So basically, when we plan the metropolitan city or maybe Umpyeonggu, then we should create spaces for citizens is what the perspective the government should have from a long time ago. But we don't have that metropolitan plan, do we? Just public officials come to these areas and decide, oh, this should become SIP and this should become something something town. That's the process. That's why every time the administration changes, the government changes, a lot of budget is put into the short-lived plans. So from the get-go, citizens should be able to participate, and that should be in the administrative procedure. Okay, so that was where the actually the disease center was located. I actually lived right near there. And if it had just remained as the Korea Center for Disease Control and Prevention, it would have remained as a place with meaning, I think. Of course, I don't think this change necessarily came because the mayor changed, but yeah, that was a long time ago, right? When the mayor was a new mayor was elected. But yeah, capitalistically, I think just leaving the place as it was would have been the best solution. We see news every day regarding SIP and other areas. The city is basically in a chaos because it changes every few years. We talked about squatting, and I think squatting only has meaning when there's context to it and identity to the space. And whether we say we're focusing on growth or whatever wording we put it to it, I think innovation policy is something that has been ongoing for several decades, and I think we can apply that to other concepts like the climate crisis, whether it be seen in the perspective of a movement or institution. So I think in history we saw the same method. We saw the same method of construction and development. And we need to see the limitations of the old ways. And it's not about who the mayor is, whether it be Oseun or Park or the Park Won-sun. We need to have a common perspective to see what kind of values a space can have. I think that's the key. So we're talking about many conflicts of policies right now. And I think in discussing the future values, we need to focus on commons of the citizens.
Thank you so much for your comment. So, any other comments or any other questions you would like to share with us? Yes, so we have one person. Would you please make it short? So I'm studying urban development and planning. So I would like to talk about something, more imaginative. So Wonjae, you talked about the concept of time, and that is something that I'm really interested in these days. Because when we are talking about institutionalized concept, you talked about this institution and systems. So I also would like to talk about rhythm, which has been contended by Repair. So I'm still studying. I'm a master's degree student, and I'm still in graduate school. So I'm still learning all these concepts. So I suppose the innovation park can be utilized as something that help us live in harmony and have better understanding. And when we discuss this innovation park, definitely we have to think about not only the resources, but also the time that we are spending there. We have to go beyond the conventional framework, the bureaucratic framework that we have, an institutionalized framework. So I wanted to make that comment. Thank you. Yes, thank you so much for your input. I think the comment, obviously, it was just a comment, not a question. So perhaps when we have time later on, we could talk about it. But so we have the audience members who have a diverse background. So I would like to summarize the talking points. It's going to be a difficult job, but I'll try. So there was one person, and she said she was studying administration. So of the organizational or the administrative theories, do you have this concept called there are many regulations and external factors which change the characteristic of a system. So perhaps the innovation park itself is neutral rather, so it is the fault falls into the hands of those who are operating the facility. So can we turn innovation into sort of an institution or system? And I think this is in line with the topic of commons, isn't it? So our public assets are controlled by the administration. So can we organize our efforts and movement against this backdrop? I suppose Korea is not alone in this. I think we have this panel discussion to ask you these questions. And the questioning in and of itself is meaningful. And I suppose we have had a learning opportunity. Thank you so much for your attention. I now conclude this session.